This is Performance Theory with Mike Clark.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Season 2 of Performance Theory. I'm your host, Mike Clark. We've got a great show for you today. On today's show, we're looking at the ketogenic diet. And there's nobody better to talk to about this than Dr. Ryan Lowery. He is the owner of Ketogenic.com, the co-author of the Ketogenic Bible, and one of the world's authorities on the ketogenic diet. Let's get this season started. We're going to jump right into the interview with Ryan. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's my pleasure.
Ryan, for those listeners who may not know who you are, tell us a bit about yourself growing up. Were you always health and fitness conscious? And what led you down the exercise physiology and nutritional science path?
Yeah, so I grew up in New Jersey. I played sports my entire life and always had an interest in nutrition, exercise, supplements. And it was interesting because kind of, as we'll dive into with keto, my goal was actually the opposite. My goal was always, how do I put on weight? I was always the skinny guy trying to put on weight, and I was playing sports because I was so active. And very early on in my life, my grandmother, who is very instrumental in my life, she passed away. She was 61 years old, way too young, from heart disease. She was obese. She had a lot of complications. And that kind of struck with me, and I realized, you know what, this is like my life's purpose. My mission is bigger than me. Like when you're young, you think you want to grow up and become like a professional athlete. And I played baseball in college, and I was like, you know what, maybe like I feel like I have a different calling out there, and I really like that took a lot from my family. I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so I set out. I went to University of Tampa, studied with my now business partner, Dr. Jacob Wilson. And we did a lot looking at just nutrition and supplements early on and exercise protocols. And we published a ton of papers, and I was just fascinated with it. I played baseball at the same time. But soon I realized, you know what, as interesting as it is to look at exercise, and I think that's very, very important, like not everyone, as much as I want my mom to go out and get into the gym, they're not always going to do it. But at some moment, everyone has to eat. And so I became fascinated with nutrition and really like how to optimize body composition. And so our first really introduction to this is a good friend of mine, Dr. Dom D'Agostino and Dr. Jeff Volek. Dr. Volek has been doing research on this for decades, and he was giving a talk about ketogenic diet and endurance athletes at a conference we were at. And at the end of the presentation, someone stood up and said, but Dr. Volek, what research is there on resistance training athletes? Sure, it can help with endurance athletes, but like, what about muscle, or what about like fat loss in people who are working out at the gym? And he goes, really, we don't have any data. And this is back in like 2010. And at that moment, Jacob and I looked at each other. We're like, wow, this is something we should do. We should look into that. And that really just started the entire spiral down, where I ended up going on doing my entire PhD and dissertation on ketogenic therapies. And really now we're just we've opened up an institute called the Applied Science and Performance Institute, and we study a lot of different things, a lot of different research, but really one of my main focuses right now is ketogenic therapies, everything from ketogenic diet to exogenous ketones. What are potential applications, potentially neurologically? We're doing a lot with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, traumatic brain injury, and really looking at that whole scope. So that's a little bit of my journey and the story in the grand scheme of things.
So for those people out there that don't exactly know what the ketogenic diet is, it's more than just hitting those target numbers on the macros. What would be your best explanation of what is the ketogenic diet?
Right. So this is a great, great question, because a lot of times you'll hear people say a ketogenic diet in layman terms is a higher fat, lower carbohydrate, moderate protein approach. Now, technically, and we talk about this in the book, a ketogenic diet, I think there's a lot of ways to do it. It's one of the reasons why we talk about a well-formulated ketogenic diet, which I think is different from what most people just deem as, oh, this is keto. But a well-formulated ketogenic diet, again, it's going to be higher fat in nature. It's going to be lower in carbohydrates, moderate in protein, but it's really by definition, any diet or any situation that forces your body to rely primarily on fat and ketones as its primary fuel source, it induces something known as ketosis. And that's something that we could talk about, but it's really that elevation in ketone levels and the reliance of fat and ketones as our primary fuel source over carbohydrates and glucose.
When discussing the ketogenic diet, do you prefer using the term diet or way of eating? Because diet always has such negative connotations to it.
It does, and I always tell people it's a ketogenic lifestyle. And when we educate, we talk about it in the book. I talk about it on social media all the time. Like, I think there's a lot that encompasses a ketogenic lifestyle, even beyond nutrition. Like, I think sleep is a big factor. I think movement is a big factor. I think social stressors are a big factor. I like to use it's a lifestyle. It's not something like you said, because I think immediately when people think diet, they think temporary. I'm going to diet for 30 days, or I'm going to diet for my wedding. No, how do you make something that's sustainable, that's really a lifestyle intervention?
When looking at the macronutrients, what ratios of carbs, fat, and protein are we aiming for?
Yeah, it varies from individual to individual based on if someone's trained and based on their goals. So if someone's more obese, if someone's leaner, also if someone's doing hardcore resistance training versus not. But really the range you're looking at, if you're talking about your macronutrients, you're looking about anywhere from 60 to some therapeutics go up to like 80% of your diet coming from fat. 20 or 15 to 30 coming from protein, and 0 to 10% really coming from carbohydrates.
So aren't carbohydrates necessary?
So if you really think about it, there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Our bodies absolutely need glucose. That's an absolute fact. The great thing about it is our bodies are very good at making its own glucose. We can make glucose from a process known as gluconeogenesis, and a lot of times people think gluconeogenesis is a bad thing. Gluconeogenesis, but for those of you who don't know, it's just basically creating glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. And so you can create gluconeogenesis, but you can do that via fat, where there's like a glycerol backbone on the back of a fatty acid that can be converted over into glucose. You do eat carbohydrates on a ketogenic diet. You're just eating more fibrous carbohydrates. You're having leafy greens and vegetables, and you're having fruits like avocado and things like that. So you are getting in carbohydrates, and your body doesn't need very many because it's relying primarily on fat and ketones as its primary fuel source.
I know that when I made a change to a keto lifestyle about 4 years ago, that was one of the things that people had the hardest time comprehending is the lack of carbohydrates in my diet and how can I survive? And
exactly. And there really is there's no necessity for I think carbohydrates, and I think we made some mistakes as far as a society and nutrition several decades ago with our food pyramid and how we kind of recommended food options. I think carbohydrates should be viewed as a tool. I think athletes can see incredible benefits from using carbohydrates strategically. Most people there's no need for carbohydrates because you have plenty of fuel in your stored body fat. You have plenty of fuel just sitting around. We just aren't able to tap into it because we're so reliant on carbohydrates and glucose and sugar in our society, and that's one of our downsides.
Now, if somebody's starting keto, would you suggest that they track their intake? And if so, is something like MyFitnessPal sufficient enough to do that?
Yeah, so I think it's good early on. The goal, I think, is to get to a point where you don't have to track because you don't want to have to be the person who's weighing stuff out at the restaurant or trying to weigh stuff out at home. But when you're first adapting and getting used to things, I think it's important because sometimes you don't realize on both ends of the spectrum, you might be so full because we know that the ketogenic diet increases satiety and you're not as hungry in some people. So like you need to make sure you're eating enough. but you also, fats are very calorically dense. So you want to make sure you're not overeating. And some people, when they're just switching to a ketogenic diet and they're having a ton of fat, they might be eating an extra 1,000 calories and they're not realizing it because they don't realize they're putting butter in their coffee and adding oils to this. And they're trying to hit a certain ratio, but they don't realize how many calories they're having. So I think MyFitnessPal is great. There's a couple others that are out there that also track like micronutrients. Like I think there's one called Cronometer. But there's a bunch of different apps that are out there that are free that you can enter in your foods, and it gives you a good idea of like, okay, cool, I'm on track, or this is what I might want to have. Oh, I didn't realize how many carbohydrates this had. I think it's just good feedback.
Yeah, I know that when I first started, I tracked for about 2 months just because I wasn't really confident in what I was doing. And I was actually doing it more as an experiment because one of my clients asked me about the ketogenic diet. I knew nothing about it, so I figured I would give it 2 months, see how I felt, and I felt so good, I've just kept going with it. But personally, every 6 to 8 months, I usually track for a couple days just to make sure that I am on track with my calorie count and that I'm getting about the right kind of macros for the diet.
That's awesome.
How long does it typically take to get into ketosis?
And this varies. This varies by, again, individual. It varies by activity level. So I've seen people get into ketosis within 3 days. I've seen people, it takes 3 weeks to get into ketosis. The people who were doing it in 3 days were high-level athletes that were working out twice a day and burning a ton of glycogen. Because think about this, your body has to switch from primarily using carbohydrates and glucose, and we have storage tanks. We have things in our bodies known as glycogen. So imagine like a gas tank that's filled up in every single one of our tissues. Like all of our muscle tissue has this gas tank, and typically in most people, it's completely full. Well, just like when you're driving a car, it takes a little while to empty your gas tank. The similar thing is it's going to take a little while to empty that gas tank, and when that gas tank is empty, that's when you start upregulating fat metabolism. That's when you start producing ketones, and it allows your body to go through this adaptation process. So if you're working out really hard and you're using that gas, you're driving your car really fast, you're going to burn through more of that gas, so you're able to adapt faster. So if you're looking to adapt faster, exercising and movement is one of the ways to accomplish that a lot faster than if you're just sedentary and trying to figure it out.
A lot of people are testing their ketones by using those ketone strips that you pee on. Now, I also heard that they are only effective for the first couple of weeks, and then you don't get a true measurement. So what is the best way to start testing those ketones? Yep, exactly. So a lot of times, and there's so much marketing going around how to measure if you're in ketosis right now, but one of the common and easy ways that's the most non-invasive is what we call the urine strips. So you pee on a strip, you look at it, if it turns like dark purple, you're in. And you're right, that's easy to use maybe for like the first 2 weeks, but it's not a great indication. It's not very reliable, and the more adapted you become, the deeper in ketosis you are, the less likely you're going to see a result on that. Like for me, I usually don't see results on the urine strips. And the reason being is because, think about it, I have ketones floating around in my bloodstream all the time, and my body's using them. It's so used to using them as a fuel source, it's not excreting them out. I'm using them at such a rapid rate. So one of the other methods that we use, and we use in a lot of our research, is blood testing. So you can look at, it's more invasive, right? You have to do a finger prick. You have to put a drop of blood into a meter, and you look, and it's measuring what's actually legitimately in your blood, and that's likely a better indicator than what you're excreting out in your urine. So what would be an optimal ketone level? Because I know that, if you take a look at social media, there's guys that are aiming for as absolutely high as possible. So people that are jumping onto keto for the first time, that's kind of what they're aiming for, whereas I heard that you can actually keep fairly low ketone levels but still be in ketosis.
Right. And I'm glad you brought this up because I think we get the comparison syndrome where we're chasing ketone levels. And I highly discourage that because I think one, for someone who just is new, it can be discouraging to try and chase a number. And everyone's so different that it's really what your own individuality allows for. Like, I've been doing this for years, and very rarely do I get over 1.0 millimole unless I do like extreme fasting or I supplement with exogenous ketones. Like that's the only way I can push over 1 millimole, and that's completely fine. And so I think a lot of times people will just try and push the needle further and further, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Like, I don't think the higher the ketone number, the better off you are, because if you think about it, if you're utilizing them and you're utilizing them at a high rate, you should be able to, they shouldn't be that high in your blood. They should be detectable and you should be able to see them, but like, you shouldn't be at 3 millimoles if your muscle and tissue are taking them up. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. So I think there's a fine balance. I would say for most people, the range you're looking to get if you're testing in blood is anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5 millimoles. I think that's a great range for people.
Who should be looking at taking on the ketogenic lifestyle?
And I think it all comes down to goals, and I think it comes down to context. I say this: if you're one of those people who can go to a family party, eat cupcakes, cookies, brownies, candy, and wake up with abs in the morning, and you feel like you feel like you lost weight instead of put on weight, you're what we call highly insulin sensitive. You're part of the probably 1% of the population. You're likely an athlete, likely someone who's very active. Is a ketogenic diet for them? Probably it's unnecessary unless they're competing in sports or they're looking for some of the other cognitive aspects of a ketogenic diet. But for the other 99%, the people who look at a donut, the people who look at a cookie and feel like they put on 5 or 10 pounds, we fall more on the side of the insulin resistance. And so the fact that we easily gain weight, we eat carbohydrates or we eat desserts and we feel sluggish, those are pretty good signs of insulin resistance. And those are the people who can really benefit from switching their fuel source from primarily carbohydrates and glucose to ketones, running on fat as fuel, and allowing your body to really achieve an adaptation and optimal functioning through a different fuel source.
Now, one of the questions I have from some of my clients is they have had their gallbladder removed and they don't typically do well with fats. Can you supplement sufficiently with something like ox bile to counter that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I get that one pretty frequently as well. I think a lot of it depends on the fats that they're consuming and then using some of those things to help break down fats. And using fats that are more easily digestible, things like MCT or coconut oil that really get rapidly broken down and digested and you don't really need many enzymes for, versus like longer chain fatty acids where if you don't have that, you really can't break it down. So I think you can. I think it needs to be a modified approach, and you're likely going to need a supplement with things like MCT, coconut oil, fish oil, things that, and some of those bile acids, things like that can help break down some of these fats.
When first starting, some people may experience what's called the keto flu, where you can have symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, and headaches. What's a best way to avoid this?
Yeah, really get adapted as fast as possible. So exercise, movement, get yourself into ketosis as fast as possible. Electrolyte supplementation. And what I mean by that really is sodium, magnesium, and potassium. So the reason people often get the keto flu is, like I said, you've been relying primarily on carbohydrates and glucose for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It's going to take more than 24 hours for your body to completely switch and start running off of fat and ketones, right? So the other aspect is when insulin is low and you're not eating carbohydrates, you're not having that influx of sugar, your insulin's going to go down. And when insulin is low, you tend to excrete out in your urine more electrolytes. You're excreting out things like sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium. So what you need to do is you need to replenish those. You need to supplement with them. You might see a lot of keto people and you're like, wow, they're having a lot of sodium. Well, there's a reason why they're having that. Is because you're excreting out so much of that in your urine that you need to supplement that back in. So salting your foods, having avocados or supplementing with potassium, having foods that are high in magnesium, and most leafy greens are, or supplementing with magnesium, like having those electrolytes and rebalancing those are going to be very, very important during that adaptation period to overcome the keto flu.
With the increase in popularity of the keto diet, some experts have said that it's a fad, and they've been trying to discredit the science behind it, saying it's dangerous and can contribute to things such as high cholesterol, kidney stones, and basically it's going to do you more harm than good, especially if you have an underlying liver or kidney issue. Is the keto diet safe?
Yes, you'll see a lot of articles and things like that coming out just because it has gotten so much publicity and press. The data on its safety, if it's a well-formulated ketogenic diet, is overwhelming. Yes. Now, where I can see things going awry is if you're having a stick of butter inside of your coffee and having bacon and burgers for every meal without the bun, and that's literally all you eat, probably not what I would consider a well-formulated ketogenic diet. And I think that's where you might see higher amounts of cholesterol is a whole different story. I'm not even as concerned about that. But triglycerides, hemoglobin A1C, you might see some complications with that if you're doing that long-term, right? If you're having just bacon, butter, eggs as your only foods for a very long time, you might run into some issues. But if you're having a well-formulated ketogenic diet, and it's been shown to be safe in a multitude of different scenarios. And I think the reason why people say it's a fad is you'll hear a lot of people get introduced to keto for what they think is weight loss, but they're actually trying to achieve is fat loss. People want fat loss, so they're like, all right, I'm going to try eating this way. But the reason they stay is for all the other benefits, right? So they understand, they feel better cognitively, they have more energy, they're not as hangry all the time. And then on top of that, the reason why this conversation is going to stay around for many, many years is it's beyond just a fat loss conversation. We're doing research, our colleagues are doing research, looking at Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injury, ALS, cancer, all of these different areas that might have benefits and suited for a ketogenic diet over a Western carbohydrate-based diet. So it's beyond just a fat loss conversation.
What is your favorite myth about keto right now?
Ooh, right now. I mean, one of the biggest myths I always get in the medical field particularly is, that's going to lead to ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is common when you're talking with practitioners or doctors. They're always worried about whenever they hear keto, they think ketoacidosis. It's very, very different and distinct from a ketogenic diet. So to give an example, ketoacidosis only really happens in uncontrolled type 1 diabetics. And it's when you have high amounts of glucose and really high amounts of ketones at the same time. And it can be deadly. And when I'm talking about high amounts of ketones, I'm talking about like 15 millimoles plus. If you're on a ketogenic diet, kind of like what we were talking about with the ranges, I've never seen someone who's on a ketogenic diet, even if they are supplementing on top of that, I've never seen someone over 3.5 millimoles. And ketoacidosis really starts creeping in around, you could even say 10 to 15 millimoles. So it's very, very different. One's a uncontrolled medical condition. One is a well-formulated style of eating. And I think that's one of the biggest ones that kind of always hangs around. It will always hang around, probably just because physicians just have associated the term keto with ketoacidosis.
We touched on this earlier, but as with everything, there's a right way and a wrong way to approach the way of eating. A lot of people are now doing more of the dirty keto because there's a lot more products out there that are marketing themselves as ketogenic, and they actually are not. What's your take on all these companies that have been putting out a lot of supposedly ketogenic products? Is it getting rushed to the market too soon?
There's a lot of you see this now. There's a lot of products, a lot of people who are trying to capitalize off of keto. Some good, some not so good, right? And so I think the key is finding out and sifting through which ones are legitimate and which ones aren't, and what their intent is behind it. Because I do think, as much as I think like the ketogenic diet would be great if everyone just ate whole foods, for sustainability purposes, like some people love cookies and some people don't love baking cookies all the time. So having a cookie option or having a bar when they're traveling on the road, making it more sustainable can be a good thing. The problem, like you mentioned, is the ill intent or some of these companies who really don't know what they're doing and just trying to capitalize off of the keto movement. It's one of the reasons why we actually recently at ketogenic.com started a certification process where literally companies will submit their product not only for us to look at labels, because I think anyone can look at a label, but we have a laboratory where we can look at glucose and ketone testing. So we're literally testing out products to make sure they're metabolically sound. And that way, like, if people are on a ketogenic diet, they know and can trust, all right, this product is legitimate versus, I don't know if this one's going to knock me out of ketosis or if it's something that I should be consuming or has high inflammatory oils or has maltodextrin in it or has some of these other ingredients and just slapped keto on their label. So that's one of the initiatives we're working towards and hopefully going to be helping clean up the industry in that regard.
Outside of carbohydrates, what other kinds of foods should people be avoiding if they want to stay in ketosis?
Yeah, I think obviously carbohydrates and high sugar foods are obvious, but two others that might not be so obvious are some sugar alcohols, like maltitol and sorbitol. You should avoid those. I think anyone should avoid those, unless it's like an absolute, I love candy and I'm addicted to it and I'm going to have a sugar-free version. But if you look at the sugar-free aisle of any store, I'd say 95% of sugar-free candies, if you're at the store and you're listening to this, go to the store next time and look at the sugar-free candy and turn over the back of the label. You'll see on the back of the label it says 20 grams of carbohydrates, but you'll see 20 grams of sugar alcohol. Like if you grab the sugar-free gummy bears or the sugar-free Jolly Ranchers, you look at the back of these, but you'll see that it's the 20 grams of sugar alcohol is maltitol and sorbitol. I've made the mistake very early on of being like, well, this is great. I know calculating net carbohydrates, you take the total carbohydrates and you subtract out the sugar alcohols. And so these are great for keto. Boy, was I wrong. And I brought some to a movie theater, and let's just say I missed 90% of the movie because I spent the entire movie in the bathroom because they just destroy your stomach. And on top of that, they increase blood glucose. So not all sugar alcohols are legitimately keto. The ones that I utilize and I can still have are things like erythritol. I use xylitol in small amounts. Like I choose xylitol gum if I'm going to have that. But those are really the only two compared to like sorbitol and maltitol and some of the other ones. That's a big one that I see a lot of. And the other one that I would mention is just vegetable oils in high amounts. I think a lot of times people like vegetable oils are full of omega-6 fatty acids, which are highly inflammatory. And like your canola oils, you see that used a lot. So that's one of the reasons why I say if you're going and you're on the road or in a bind, it's perfectly fine to grab a burger without a bun and a bacon burger without a bun and have that. But like if that's something you have twice a day, every day as your only meal, probably not the best idea because a lot of those burgers are cooked with vegetable oils or you're having high inflammatory oils that are being used. And it's just not something you want to consume all the time. And so I think those are the two things that I would recommend to people is just watch out for some of those sugar alcohols and then watch out for the types of oils that you're consuming.
When somebody's first starting keto, I think one of the biggest challenges is to get your correct calorie count. Do you have a preferred calculator for how many calories you should be having?
We have one on ketogenic.com. So we have a calculator. It's completely free. You enter in all your information. And we tried to do it. We did algorithms to try and compare it as close as possible to laboratory equipment, metabolic carts that we have in the laboratory. It's really, really good and really accurate. But if you don't want to go through the process, you don't want to go through a calculator, one of the ways that you could do it, it's probably more intensive, but you could literally sit there and track what you eat in a typical week. So track what you eat for an entire week and track your weight and say, am I gaining? Am I losing? Am I staying the same? If you track your food for an entire week, you get a rough baseline of about how many calories you consume per week. And if your weight isn't changing, you know that's probably right around your maintenance point. And from there, you can make adjustments. So I would say the calculator is the quicker, easier way to do it. If you don't want to go that route, you can track and then make adjustments based on where you think you're at, and then maybe cut by 250 calories or maybe add by 250 calories, depending upon what your goals are.
One of the lesser known macronutrients is alcohol. And one of the top questions I get is, can you have alcohol on the keto diet?
Yeah, this one's an interesting one. There is actually something known as alcoholic ketosis. It's not something I recommend, but like if you were to literally just drink straight vodka and probably test your blood, you would be really, really high. So don't recommend that. Don't do that at home. But if you're looking for how do you incorporate in alcohol, listen, at the end of the day, I know socially, sometimes you want to go out, you want to have drinks. If you're out with friends and family, you're out having a nice meal. There are alcoholic drinks that are a lot lower in carbohydrates and sugar than others, right? Red wine, dark. If you're doing wine, stick with the drier red wines. They're a lot lower in sugar than sweet white wines. If you're having beer, you're starting to see a lot of beer now, like Michelob Ultra and some of these other ones that are about 3 or 4 carbohydrates per beer. Now, if you have 10 or 12 beers, that's probably an issue. But if you're having one or two, probably not that big of a deal. And then in spirits, stick with like the clearer, non-flavored stuff. So if you're going to have like vodka or tequila or something, or rum, like keep it clear, keep it unflavored, and then mix it with like water, soda water, that's non-caloric, and you can add in like a natural sweetener of your choice. Things like that I would recommend for people on the alcohol front.
Now, many people are using a combination of the keto diet and intermittent fasting to achieve their desired results. Is it safe and effective to combine the two?
Yeah, I do it all the time. I think intermittent fasting, even if you're not on a ketogenic diet, I think intermittent fasting is a great tool for people to condense their eating window. I think we live in an environment, we live in a society right now where we have so much food at our disposal that we're constantly snacking and munching, and we're never allowing that rest and we're never allowing that rest process of the rest and digest. And we're just constantly eating and exposed and have access to food. So for me, like I do intermittent fasting. I do anywhere from 14 to 16 hours daily, which basically means I'm eating between a 10 and an 8-hour window. So like I might eat between 12 o'clock in the afternoon and 8 o'clock at night. Like that's pretty typical for me, is from 12 to 8 is when I eat my meals. And I might have 2 meals within that window. I think it's a great tool to not only enhance ketosis, but also I just think for anyone to help control that feeding period, I think it's a great tool.
What kind of supplements do you recommend for maintaining that keto lifestyle and keeping you on track for the keto diet?
Supplements, it's important to understand, supplements are there to do exactly that, supplement the diet. They're not there to replace it. They're not there to try and do anything. I'm a big fan of electrolytes. I think electrolytes are essential. Utilizing high quality, like real salt, getting in good quality electrolytes, I think are great. I use exogenous ketones as a tool as like a pre-workout. I use them for neurological function as a pickup in the middle of the day. I think those can be a tool. I think there's another ingredient that I use called berberine. So berberine has been shown, it's basically a blood glucose lowering agent. You take it, and even if you're not on a ketogenic diet, I would recommend berberine with your meals, just because it lowers the blood glucose impact and the effect. And so I think that's a great tool as well. Just make sure you're not taking it on an empty stomach, because you can go hypoglycemic with it. But yeah, those three things I would say are pretty, and fish oil. I'm a big fan of fish oil and vitamin D3, especially if you live in places where you're not getting a lot of sun. Just staples like that I would consume whether I was on a ketogenic diet or not. Those are things that I also incorporate in.
Ryan, what does a typical day of eating look like for you?
Yeah, so I wake up in the morning. I typically, I usually don't drink coffee in the morning, usually just a lot of water. I'll actually add salt to my water. And then I work out early, so I'll have exogenous ketones with more electrolytes in the morning before my workout. And then I usually eat my first meal, which is typically a salad with some type of meat or fish, maybe some pork rinds, around 1 o'clock. And then I have my dinner and sometimes like a little dessert after, around 7:30. And again, it's usually 4 to 6 ounces of meat, some vegetables, maybe a side salad. And then I have a sweet tooth. I always have. And so I have a little dessert like after my dinner, and I'm usually done eating by 8 o'clock at night and perfectly fine, full, content, and in bed by 10:30, 11 o'clock.
The majority of people that are undertaking this diet right now are looking for weight loss. How long does it typically take for your average person to see some results?
Yeah, and I think it varies by person. I think it depends on where their starting point is. And I'll give some examples of that, because if someone's overweight and sometimes obese, if they're doing a well-formulated ketogenic diet, they're going to see results pretty drastically. I'll give you an example. My brother, I talked about this. I had him on a podcast recently, and I was talking to him, and he had gotten up really, really overweight and obese and was really struggling, a lot of stress in his life. And he was like, you know what, bud, I'm going to get back on it. And he started August 1st. And he's down 32 pounds.
That's awesome.
At this point, really melted off, because he made such a drastic change, and he was eating out all the time, eating dessert. So he lost a ton of body fat very, very quickly. And he started working out, started moving. So super proud of him. But some people, if you're starting out and you really are just trying to lose 10 to 15 pounds, obviously you're not going to lose 32 pounds in a month. But if you have a little bit to lose, it's all about just what your goal is, setting those goals, setting expectations, and playing the long game. I like people to understand, one of the reasons why I always go back to a lifestyle: set long-term goals, set things, and don't go, all right, well, I hit 5 pounds, I'm good to go, I'm going to go back to my old ways. Get rejuvenated and keep going. Maintain that, or set a new goal to lose another 3 pounds in the next 2 months, and really work towards that. Maybe incorporate in some movement, maybe incorporate in some more intermittent fasting, things like that is what I encourage people to do.
Inevitably, there's going to be a time when you stall. So what's the best approach to take when you've stopped producing results?
Yeah, great question. Really take an internal deep dive into what you're doing. So understand what you're doing. Are you doing intermittent fasting? What do your macronutrients look like? Are you exercising? Really take a deep dive and look at all those things. Are there anything in the past 2 to 3 weeks that you've introduced that was new and novel, and you didn't really, and all of a sudden you stopped responding? Are you now having some keto ice cream at night, every single night? Or are you now having some sugar-free candy more often than you probably shouldn't. Really take a deep dive and look at those things. And if it's all dialed in and you're like, nope, there's nothing I've changed, one of my hacks, I guess you could say, that I use a lot for overcoming plateaus is I actually incorporate in a weekly protein up. I know a lot of people talk about carb ups. I do a protein up. And what I mean by that is, like, I'll incorporate in low carb still, but like Greek yogurt, and I'll have it with protein powder, and I'll have it with coconut manna. It's a great combination to like mix around. And like Greek people would be like, wow, that's too much protein. Well, on days that I'm training hard or I'm going to be more active or I'm moving around my family, I might do a protein up where I'm still lower carb. It's not like I'm going out and having a buffet of just carbohydrates and food. No, I'm having things like Greek yogurt, and my protein might be a little bit higher. I bring down my fat. It's not as high, and my carbohydrates are still low. But for me, that kind of jump starts or resets my metabolism because my calories might be a little bit higher, but they're from protein, and protein is very thermogenic. It's very difficult to store protein as fat, and it kind of resets me and gets me going. And that's one of the biggest things I see a lot in the people, because they tend to be so afraid of protein and tend to restrict it, that just doing a once-a-week protein up, still keeping fat moderate and still keeping carbohydrates low, tends to really help them overcome that plateau.
Not everybody that jumps onto the ketogenic diet is using it for weight loss. However, is the ketogenic diet effective for athletes such as bodybuilders that are looking for that ultra-low body fat percentage while maintaining their muscle mass or increasing their muscle mass?
Yeah, so that was actually our first study. So we did a study on highly resistance-trained individuals, and we looked at their body composition over 10 weeks. And what we found was that those who were on a well-formulated ketogenic diet were able to gain just as much muscle as those who were eating carbohydrates and lose actually significantly more fat than those who are eating carbohydrates, despite their protein being the exact same, both groups. Now, for the Mr. Olympia and the people who are doing bodybuilding competitions, there's a lot more that's involved. There's obviously hormones and things that they incorporate in. But
there's a lot of extra supplements.
Yeah, there's a lot of extra things going on. We've worked with people who have competed at the Arnold and Mr. Olympia, and a lot of them go very low carb. They might not be as high fat, but with their workouts are likely in a state of ketosis as it is, going into shows to really dial in and lean it up. So those are just some things that, yes, it's feasible. At that level, when they're using things like exogenous insulin and exogenous hormones, it's probably a different situation.
Through your research, have you found an optimal workout plan for achieving muscle growth on keto?
Honestly, I think the optimal workout for achieving muscle on keto and the optimal plan for achieving muscle on if you're having carbohydrates is probably the same. What that means is getting in a couple days per week of full body resistance training, utilizing weights, hitting every muscle group, ideally twice a week, doing high intensity interval training. I'm a big proponent of high intensity interval training compared to steady state cardio. I think it helps deplete glycogen levels more. It's more time efficient. If I can get cardio done in 15 minutes versus 60 minutes on a Stairmaster, I'm all for it. So studies show that high intensity interval training is just as effective as steady state cardio, and it's way less time. So high intensity interval training and resistance training, I think, is a good combination.
One of the phrases that can be seen throughout all of your social media is make positivity louder. Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so strong on this that I think we live in a society right now where negativity takes precedent for a lot of people. And I've had family members, I've had friends that I've watched their lives go down the drain, quite honestly, just because they've let negativity take over, and then that spirals into a negative effect, right? They surround themselves with negative people, they listen to negative news, everything's negative, and we all know people like that. And my thing is, why don't we flip that on its head and like the amazing aspects of what happens when you truly make positivity louder and you surround yourself with people that are like-minded and see that different perspective. and understand that, like, if you look at the world and you say, you know what, oh, there's all this stuff that's going on, it's terrible, it's negative, that's all you're going to see. And you're living, and what good does that do you, and what good does that do anyone? When in reality, you can look at it from a different lens and put on a different hat and go, wow, like, there are so many incredible people in this world. I'm so grateful to even have a shot at another day of living on this planet and having a shot at helping people and living my best life. And there's so many great things that are going on. Why not look at the world through that lens and live in a state of bliss and gratitude? And I just like to highlight people, like to highlight things that are doing that, because people often don't see it. When you turn on the news, very, very few times do you see things that are, oh, this person was saved, or this guy saved these cats, or this kid volunteered to do this. Instead, it's shootings, drugs, this, because people are so attracted to it. My goal is, how do we change that conversation? How do we change that lens? How do we change that perspective and really look at positivity as the driving force of what can change and radically change someone's life?
Ryan, is there anything you want to let the listeners know that you guys have coming up or being released soon? Something that you're developing?
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff that's coming up in the works. One of which is we've gotten a lot. We're actually translating the Ketogenic Bible into multiple languages, but one of the bigger projects that we'll be launching within the next 30 to 60 days is we've gotten a lot of requests for expanding upon the Ketogenic Bible. And so for us, one of the ways that we wanted to do that is I love educating. I love teaching. And I love I'm better talking in person than trying to write things on paper, because I think things get lost in translation. When you're you can't write enough. That's the reason why the Ketogenic Bible ended up being a textbook. It's so many pages, but we try to get all of that information in there, and there's still stuff that we weren't able to get in there. So it's a lot easier to get information and stuff through video format. So we're actually creating an entire video course and certification that'll have CEUs with it that will literally go through everything from the history of the ketogenic diet, all the way through applications of the ketogenic diet, all the way through some of the top tips and Q&As, some of the stuff we touched on here today of, like, what are some of the roadblocks? What are some of the things that people struggle with? How to overcome that? And literally, like, hours and hours of video format and interaction of taking someone through from beginning to end of how to really understand and implement a well-formulated ketogenic lifestyle, not only for them, but for those around them, those that they care about, if they want to go on and pursue that.
Any of the listeners out there that want to purchase the Ketogenic Bible, where's the best place to find it?
Yeah, honestly, Amazon. I think Amazon or your local Barnes & Noble. Most Barnes & Noble have it. Amazon's quick; it gets delivered. So those are probably the two best ways.
Ryan, I want to thank you for joining us on Performance Theory today. Where can our listeners reach out to you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram is at Ryan P. Lowery. My middle name's Patrick. A lot of times people think it's Plowry, but it's at Ryan P. Lowery. And then on Facebook, Dr. Ryan Lowery. And then for all the keto-related stuff, at Ketogenic.com, and the website is Ketogenic.com for all free content, recipes, articles, calculator, anything that you need. Podcast is What the Fat. Yep, that's on iTunes or anywhere podcasts are available.
This has been Performance Theory with Mike Clark, featuring Dr. Ryan Lowery on this episode. Ryan, thanks once again for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was an absolute honor, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys, for listening. Please share this podcast and make sure you subscribed, because a bunch of you are listening haven't passed it on to your friends. Find me on social media at Mike Clark Life on all major platforms, or visit MikeClarkLife.com.